great honor to be on for the 5th anniversary of here Construction Tech Passive House Live and the Global Passive House Hour. 5 years ago, we were in a weird place and we came together as a community and we made some amazing strives together. And today's presentation is the strives not only that we made during that time, but before that, we built upon it. And each project has gotten better and better and better. And Mike's got a great presentation. I'm proud to have been a part of these projects that Michael has led and everything that is created. I'm proud to be a part of the Passive House Accelerator. I'm proud to be a part of this community. I'm even more proud that the end project is the tightest passive house project I have ever tested in 5 years, and it's all because of community and sharing and collaboration. I'll kick it off to my next show host. I'm excited. Thank you.
If you're a passive house designer, builder, verifier, or rater, or you want to be, this Passive House Accelerator weekly live series is for you. So today we're celebrating our 5th anniversary of bringing these incredible projects with all their successes, failures, and details to you for free. So we're thrilled to celebrate, and you're going to get an incredible tour through a bunch of projects Michael has worked on. We're all excited to be here and share in this celebration. So we're glad you're here online, and check out the recordings, share your projects with us. And I'm going to hand it over to Sean St. Amour.
Now I get to kick off a few words of Mr. Michael Ingui, who has been able to gather all of us and put us all under an envelope, an umbrella, and bring us here. So Mr. Michael Ingui is the president of Ingui Architecture. Michael believes in creative collaboration and allows his artistic process to inform his designs, blending art and architecture to award-winning spaces and groundbreaking businesses. Sorry, Michael, I'm emotional. It really caught me. I'm just so grateful to be here, buddy. So yeah, Michael is co-founder of BIA Interiors, an integrated forward-thinking interior firm with Bax Ingui, a leader in high-performance buildings, and can you believe it? Yeah, he's also the founder of the Passive House Accelerator and co-founder of Source 2050. So Michael, thank you so much for allowing us to come together. Appreciate everything that the entire team of the Passive House Accelerator creates. Love my co-hosts. And Michael, show us some of the great things that you've been creating.
Cool, thanks. And that was a good intro. And I have to say a couple of words about the accelerator and this crew and everybody who's been coming to these events every week. First of all, the accelerator team, it just kicks ass, and it's so much fun with what everybody sees, and it's even more from like behind the scenes. It's addictive. Which is sometimes problematic, but it's but it's a lot of fun. So I appreciate it. I feel super lucky to be able to collaborate with everybody here. So thank you very much. You know, the way our office is set up is a really similar situation. We've got 7 principals, each one with a team. Honestly, they could survive quite nicely without me or without each other. Each one could have their own little firm, but we like to work in a collaborative way. And I'm pretty excited about walking everybody through the 4 projects that we're going to walk through in a second. We have been, over the past decade or more, trying to create a repeatable approach to doing passive house retrofits in a way that gets closer and closer and closer to cost neutral, and also takes some of the guesswork out of it. A bunch of the folks who are on this, including Kevin and John and a whole bunch of other people who are on this, have all been a big part of that as well. And picking apart everything, like every single time, I'm sure. Even after this, we'll pick it apart more. And it's just what we do, and we like to do it, and the contractors like to do it. So it's created a little bit of a community where the contractors are all sharing with each other, competing with each other. And it's honestly, it's just fun. So I've wanted to do this for a long time. We currently have a bunch of projects that allowed it to happen. So instead of me running around and trying to make it all happen, I pre-filmed it. They're all within like 15 blocks of each other, but it's so interesting. And let's see where it goes. We'll watch the tape, and then we can keep talking about it. There's a lot to see here. It was hard to get down into 20, 25 minutes. So I'm Michael Ingui from Ingui Architecture, also the founder of the Passive House Accelerator and co-founder of Source 2050. We're here today because this is the first project we're going to visit on a tour of a bunch of the projects we have going on right now. One of the benefits of some of our projects is right now within like a 15 block radius, we have a whole bunch of different townhouses going on in historic districts that are happening all at the same time. This project is obviously in the demo phase. We've just finished demo. We're starting to do some parge coat and some other items. The next one is we're a little further along. We've started to do some of our air sealing. The next one, even more air sealing, and we're going to end it at a really beautiful finished project. So I'm pretty excited to do this. We're also going to talk to a bunch of the contractors because although it's interesting to hear what I have to say, it's, I think, a little more interesting to see what they have to say. And with that, I'll introduce Pat. You know our Sutton already because they did Engine 16, which is another one of our projects, which was a lot of fun. It was a converted firehouse in Manhattan that's already been on the Accelerator and Reimagined Buildings several times. It's a NYSERDA funded Buildings of Excellence Award winner. So with that, Pat, give us the 1 minute spiel.
So I'm Pat Spittler. I'm the owner of our Sutton. We started this company around 2016, 2017. When we started, I don't even know if I knew the term passive house. If you had said it to me, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. After seeing the difference of what building passive really is, our goal is to be building all passive. We're not talking about the old way of building. We're like, you always do it this way.
Before we really kind of get into solutions and how we're doing it, which is why we're here with Pat, I'm just going to highlight a couple of issues, just a couple of things. You can see lots of holes here. You can actually see a massive hole there with a little bit of like insulation stuffed in, but not really well. You can also start to see openings here, like wind, like that I can feel. So who cares how the windows are performing? None of that's performing well. That's bringing moisture in, that's bringing bugs in, that's bringing lots of other things in. When you put your exhaust fan on and you're putting in from a bathroom 100 cubic feet per minute out of the house, or a kitchen exhaust fan, sometimes 800 or 1,000 cubic feet per minute. Think about that, 1,000 cubic feet per minute. You're sucking air out, air's got to come in. Where do you think it's coming in from? That's your fresh air highway right there. Right here, right here. So you're wondering, like, why is my house dusty? Why do I have pollen issues in my house? Why am I having all these problems? If you don't fix this stuff before you do all the beautiful finishes, you're doomed. And then if you do fix all this stuff, all of a sudden I could do things like not have radiators on this wall, which is what I do care about, because I don't want radiators because I want to design cool stuff. And I can get all my mechanicals in the center, and I can have houses that barely need any heat. And all we did was fix the stuff that honestly you should be fixing anyway. So, you know, is there anything structurally wrong with this wall? No. Is there a concrete coating on the outside that really doesn't let too much moisture through? Yes, but it does let moisture through, and it definitely lets all those allergens through. So let's talk about what heat does in these houses. Right now, there was a radiator right here. There was a hole right there. You can see where the radiator pipe was. This radiator, half of what it's doing is heating up all this stuff because there's no insulation and there's holes everywhere. But the cold is making its way through. Actually, it's the winter, so I can feel this still. This is cold. That joist is cold. This joist is cold. This floor is cold. I've got a cold radiator coming through. That warm radiator's got to heat all that stuff up before it even gets to the space. Now we simply put a piece of insulation between that, and I don't have that thermal bridge. Let's get into like what you're dealing with here.
Okay, so on a lot of these projects, LPC landmarks, they insist that if this door is in good shape, and for this one they said, yes, this is in good shape, sound and sturdy. They're making us keep this door as part of the package, which sometimes we do by choice, sometimes we do if landmarks makes that decision for us. We'll tighten this up, we'll add gasketing and do whatever we can to make this as airtight as possible, but this will never perform as well as a passive door would perform, a triple pane, gasketed, multi-point locking passive door. So in this job and in many jobs, we actually have to step the passive envelope into the space. So in this one in particular, there's going to be a foyer vestibule when you come in. There's going to be a coat closet here. The wall is going to come around and over, and these two interior doors will be part of our passive envelope. And all the little nooks and crannies surrounding this door, the returns here, where the joist interfaces with the front of the building, where the bottom of that stone, all of that has to be parged and get the liquid applied air membrane to tighten it all up and make it so we're not going back and trying to figure out a problem after the fact. We're dealing with it right now when it's a demoed, fairly empty site, and we can get this whole situation locked and loaded before we so we're not working in reverse. We don't want to do anything in the wrong order and have to do an air barrier, and then the next week we're ripping it out to make the corrections.
When we take a look at these townhouses that we work on, or some of these historic buildings that we work on, one of the things that we're constantly looking at is how much of it can we keep? When we think about embodied carbon and everything else, so you have to start to ask yourself, how much does it make sense to gut these projects versus not gut them? In this particular case, this house had many lives and actually needed a lot of work. So we had to do it. Even the stair was falling down and we couldn't keep it, but we can save the joists. The greenest buildings are the buildings that already exist, but only if you treat them the right way while you're doing your renovation as well. They're actually working out where some of our steel has to go. We're purposely doing it between the joists so that we don't have to do temporary shoring.
The goal in here is to put really basically 5 pieces of steel that run across a header at the stairs, and our whole entire floor diaphragm, substrate, whatever, is existing material.
One of the reasons you're seeing this is 3 sides are exposed. How do I deal with the thermal bridge of all the joists coming through these walls? Well, these joists all need a lot of work. If you took a close look at some of them, they've all been cut through. A lot of them have cracks, but we're still able to use a lot of them, which is why they're doing the takeoffs. But what we're doing is we're using the steel as our main members, then we're going to head it off, and we're actually going to run these joists this way in the short direction. It helps with some of our plumbing lines as well, but that's the kind of stuff that really makes the next steps even possible. So Pat, tell us about the parge code.
This has become standard procedure for us, whether it's passive or not. Any plaster that's loose, like this was all plaster, we chip it off, knock it off, and we get to like a good solid substrate like this, and then we parge. So this is the first step to get to making every wall airtight. This is basically giving us a good base for whatever kind of liquid applied membrane we decide to use. All of these joists are going to come out and rotate 90 degrees, so we didn't waste time parging in around the joist. You can see what a tough condition that is. Those joists typically, this is a 3 brick party wall, and the joists typically back up to one another with our neighbor. So if you were to do a blower door and hold a smoke stick right at these joists, the air would be flying through those openings. So this same operation here is going to happen there once we do the joist work. This is not the time to rush and start installing steel or starting to do framing layout or whatever. This is the time to look at the entire house, every bit of it, with the fireplaces. The coal chute is always a big one. Any penetration. On this house, we have 2 penetration. This is a atypical setup where we have drain lines coming in at the back corner. We have gas coming in at the front corner. We have there's a lot of penetrations to the building. We have to get all of that stuff tight, have a plan in place to detail everything, and then you're off to the races.
Now that we've been to a demoed project where we're starting to do some of the parge coating, we're looking at another project we're on, which is a carriage house, and they're a little further along where they're in the process of just getting their whole envelope together. We're looking at the slab that's also being used for the garage floor. You can start to see some core drilling here where we've got the penetrations, and they do it in a way where they're far enough away from the wall. It's a small detail with big implications. They haven't made those penetrations when they did the blower door, but they did make this one. So you can start to see this pipe's pulled away from the wall enough where that penetration can be taped, can be worked out, and you can see that detail here. You've got the exterior wall, you've got the plywood fully taped. That will get sheetrock, double layer, type X sheetrock, and you've got your air barrier here. So we've got our air barrier fully sealed. There'll be a car here, there'll be an electric car, they might put a charger here. This will be a beautiful door. This will probably perform incredibly well. I mean, it's outside our envelope, but we still treat it really well. Coming back to sequencing, and this is a trench that's actually being set up for the makeup air in the kitchen. Lubo and the Tefera team have this already set up, taped and ready. You also have the ERV supply register installed. There's no ductwork on this, but what Lubo and the team have done is they've made sure that through the trench over here, the ERV supply, which is your fresh air supply, that it all works with the ceiling height, because this house has some really cool windows with some technical details, and we want to make sure we hit that flat. Again, it's just sequencing. One of the things that we like to do is we like to provide a lot of daylight into the houses that we're working on, and passive houses are no different. But passive or not passive, walkable skylights really allow for that. This is in a landmark district, so the deck's got to be nice and low. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at a Facro product. This is a walkable skylight. I'm not going to get any energy issues out of this. I'm going to be able to keep all of my heat on the inside. It's got a little bit of dimpling, so it's non-skid, which is also nice. And it'll be flush with my decking surface, which will be a paver on pedestals. They already have the curb installed, which is nice. You're starting to see our outboard insulation, where I say this often, you know, best thing you can do with the sun and the heat is not let it in at all. It's not that we're not insulating on the inside too, because we are, but we've got rigid insulation on the outside, our protection board to create a nice solid piece. We're using a liquid applied roofing product here that will then tie into this. And what's nice about all this, so you actually, in this particular case, you've got two layers. This is our temp roof that you can see. This is our ice and water shield temp roof that you're looking at below that. They're taping to that. That's already sealed. Then we're doing our insulation. Then we've got our other protection board that's going to come to here. Then you're going to have our liquid applied that's going to tie into that. So it's going to be a really clean install. But what everybody's going to see when we're done is a paver that's level with that, where you can walk on this and I still get all this incredible light that comes down. It's a huge improvement to the industry to be able to have these. And the reason we've split this down the middle is we have a beautiful light positioned in there as well. I'm in the cellar, and what you're looking at is a slightly more complete version of the Stego wrap. They've ran the Stego a little long, and they're using a Proclima tape here to connect that product. This is a Stego mastic right here that's attaching to this liquid applied, which is Proclima. But you've got your liquid applied, you've got your Stego mastic, and you think that's the only thing you're looking at, but it's not. The way this team has it set up, it's belt and suspenders again. Every one of the contractors that we're working with, they don't want to come back to these details. So what you're not seeing here, but behind here, is the Stego termination bar on the plywood. And what they've done is they've wrapped that over, and they're using the tape here. So you've got the Stego coming up here, lapping back down after it's been connected. So this is in a perfect spot for us to start talking about sequence and what we do. You've got the liquid applied on the brick. This is vapor open. You've got space between the stud and the brick for our dense packed cellulose to hit. You can start to see the plywood air barrier beginning to be installed. None of this is touching the brick. I've got my stave core stud here. I've got my stud here. It's going fully up to a head. I've got my plywood jam, plywood here. This will get taped. This is my structure for my window. I'm not using the brick. So you've got to get rid of the thermal bridge. It's again one of the best things that we learned through Passive House, which is why I can do sinks on outside walls now. I can put my water lines here because I've got my insulation between here and there. We do a lot of work in historic buildings. So the next question is, okay, but you know that freeze thaw is an issue. So these are 3 bricks wide, 3 whites wide, these front walls. And these bricks have lime-based mortar, and they're used to getting some heat from the inside to help them to dry out, especially in ice and snow, even more than water. So we're actually not over-insulating these. 1. 2, they're vapor open. So it's like me walking around with a big plastic bag on, and I'm gonna get really sweaty and gross inside that plastic bag, versus me walking around in a runner's jacket that lets the runners breathe. It doesn't let the cold air in. It's a windbreaker, but it still lets it breathe. Super simple. These are not new concepts. It's also why we like working with the Passive House consultant, because the Passive House consultant helps us only use this much insulation here. They're running it through a passive house planning package or a woofie, whichever one they're using. They're using software to tell us only use this much insulation because, yeah, that'll work for your house, but it will also help you not have an issue with that brick that still definitely does need some of that heat to escape through it. And then finally, Betham, tell us a little bit about the transition between the plywood and the liquid applied.
We start by scribing the plywood so it's close enough to the wall so we don't have bigger gaps in there. You know, like you want to try to make those gaps small enough, you know, like for the wall and the plywood to move, but not big enough that you might have an air leak. The second approach that we take is like we try to seal that corner using, you know, like one of the store product, which is the rapid seal caulking. We use a bead of caulking, and then on top of that we use a tape. So that's what allows us to be like 99.9% sure that that corner is not going to leak. And the rapid seal from store, it allows for the wood and the bricks to move without like creating like cracks. And then the tape is the same thing, is a little bit movable. It's a little bit time and money spent up front, but it well pays you. Like when you kind of like do your blower door, you know that those corners are like 100% done. You don't have to like go back to them, especially the corners where you have two walls meeting each other. Like if you have a leak in there, I promise you it's gonna cost you more later. Every job we set up like meetings with the subs and everybody, and we go through like all like detailing that we're gonna do, and like be careful, like, you know, you're gonna make a hole, you're gonna screw a box wrong, let us know, we deal with it. And we always treat it like as much carefully, as much care as we can give it to it, because, you know, we want to perform, we want to make sure that like we get, you know, a good number, and the guys are, you know, well trained, they are very careful. So, you know, like you have to have all your subs in board and believe for it to actually work and for you to get a great number. It's very helpful for us to do like an initial blower door before we start fully closed with sheetrock, because at least we know where we are with the number. And if we are way low, it just gives us the go ahead to start closing. The sequencing is important, as it is the air sealing. You want to do your blown insulation too before a lot of like ducts gets run, because you want to make sure you get that insulation in every cavity, every space, so you're fully insulated. So yes, the sequencing is one of, you know, most important parts of the passive house. This is our third house. We are doing our own blown insulation. It works very well with the scheduling and with the getting it like, you know, wall by wall by wall. So it's really worked for us.
These buildings always move. They're masonry buildings. So what's nice about the dense packed cellulose is that cellulose is so packed well, and it's so loose that it will help to keep the consistency that you want. There's a lot to look at here, and it's really helpful. So we've got insulation to keep the slab at a good temperature, and we've got the stego wrap, which is not yet tied in at the end. At some point, you've got to deal with the stego, and you've got to actually terminate it and connect the two. How do you plan to do that?
So that's a good question. So the way that we like to do is like we like to do 2 quarts of stow. We run our plywood, and then we stow it, we seal it, again the plywood, and then that's where we terminate our stego with our termination bar and like tapes and double-sided tapes. Again, the same thing. Stego has a system that they supply to you that helps you, like do all these terminations, and we like to bring this always up just to stop any water, anything from like coming through from the neighbor's cellar, because our elevation here and the neighbor's elevation are the same at this point. So like by us bringing the stego all the way up, it allows like any leakages or any seepage of water from the neighbors, stop it so it doesn't come in our cellar. With the old joists, we clean them up with, you know, alcohol or anything just to make any dust, and then we use like quite a thick rapid seal caulking around them, which allows again for any movement for them, you know, to do. Like the new ones, when we install them in the pockets, like we do the same thing. These are like, you don't need to sand them because they're kind of new. Like you just clean them up and use rapid seal around them. Try to be generous with applying it just to make sure that like you have any leaks.
In this particular case, there are no thermal bridge considerations because this is a party wall. My neighbor next to me has heat in their cellar as well. If these were going front to back or I was an end building, there would be a thermal bridge here. The house we started in is an end building that has a thermal bridge. What we're doing there is we're trying to limit as many of these as we can, or where we can't, we're running it through our passive house planning package, or depending on what you're using, and the program is telling us how bad that thermal bridge is and how we have to deal with it with insulation or other uses. But this is an outside wall, and what we've done here is we have put a piece of steel across, so we're dealing with a thermal bridge only in one location. And you can start to see we've got the wood member in the steel and the joists hung from that, so that we're not having that situation in multiple locations. It's that kind of thing that we do. And again, that comes into working with the right structural engineer as well. It's all a team. What we do is we do these super meetings in our office at the beginning of a project before anybody really goes bananas with their mechanical or structural drawings. We're sitting down with the contractor and we ask everybody, how do you want to do it? Do you want to use wood joists, which they do? Some like metal joists. Are we going to use a lot of heavy steel? How do we feel about the thermal bridge? In some cases, it's just easier just to let them go through and deal with it. In some cases, it's better to header them off and deal with it this way. This is a perfect place to look at it. So Bethan, we just walked through the other project. We're now in a much more finished project. But you know me, I want to know what's behind the walls. So we're standing in front of a north-facing window, which we typically would have never put this much glass on a north facade. But these icon windows and doors, they perform incredibly well. So it's not an issue. In fact, if I don't have solar gain on them, I really typically don't have an issue. So all of a sudden we can get all this really great glass and all this wonderful light. But A, they're massive and they're heavy. And B, what are the layers? What am I not seeing?
What you're not seeing here is like that we use plywood as an air barrier and we used Partel tapes. You know, like it was all like we stick to only Partel, like all the joists, all the windows, everything is Partel tapes. And then the insulation that we used cellulose for the back, the front and back. And then for the walls and like the ceilings and floors, we use rock wool. The way that like we install these doors is that like Icon delivers to us deglazed, so we are able to actually so we are actually able to put them in place in here, you know, like with a unit of this size, I don't think, you know, we can even lift it, you know. So it takes a couple of guys. It's always, you know, teamwork, team effort.
You've got this arched element that hides a few things. We've got the only mechanicals right there with a duct right here hitting both the front and back. So for example, I didn't need to put a radiator all the way over there, which helps me bring that window all the way down. So I just have a ceiling hung Mitsubishi unit right here, access from the top of the closet, like Bethan said, and it let our team design it differently where we can start to do some of the things our clients wanted. They wanted a coat closet. They wanted a powder room, but they didn't want to clog up the whole space. And we took up space with other things that we really did want. We've got two staircases here that go down. One that really seamlessly connects the garden floor family room to this, and another one that lets us traverse the whole house. It just freed us up to make these decisions in ways we could never have done otherwise. We pre-planned to have the ERV in a place where the homeowner could easily get to the filters. Pre-planning is important, making sure I can get to all these things, making sure it works with the whole layout. That's what we're working with the contractors and the mechanical engineers and the passive house consultants, and just really getting that systematic approach is all about. It's what creates that finished product that really, really works the way you want it to. So thank you so much for coming on this fun tour with us. And getting here isn't rocket science. It's a systematic approach. It's one that everybody enjoys. I mean, you can hear it with the builders. They were super excited about it. We've got builders who hit their blower door number immediately and are running around still trying to find more holes. It's just a whole other way of building. It's a fun way of building, and it's better for the environment and it's better for the clients. What's also clear is that you don't have to sacrifice any of your design or other needs to hit these numbers, to do a passive house. In fact, it's the opposite. It frees the designer and allows you to do things you just couldn't do otherwise. You wouldn't be able to do otherwise. We've created such a serene, comfortable environment because of what we did before. Again, when I walk through a house, the first question I will be asking is, what is behind the walls? Did they seal it? Did they do the infrastructure? It's wonderful to have the fun stairs. We love designing cool, wonderful sculptural spaces. But if I want a healthy home, if I want a filtered fresh air home, sealed from some of the elements we're talking about, you got to fix what's behind the walls first. And this is how we do it.
So we will be jumping into our questions, but first we are going to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. Hang tight.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to thank the fine organizations that make our work possible here at the Passive House Accelerator. So a big thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool North America, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Facro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Building Type, Brennan, Holsarm System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, RDH Building Science, and Sanderson Sustainable Design. Thank you, sponsors.
Thank you, sponsors is right. That's how we get to do all of these amazing programming projects for free. So you can really see what's going on out there in other people's passive house worlds. So let's jump right into a couple of questions. Our first one is from Brent W. Brent, are you available to unmute and ask your question live?
Hey, everyone. Michael, great projects. Well, I think it's a quick question, but I'm curious about how you go about talking about renovation costs at like the early stages of a project. I mean, just for example, I have a current renovation that we're going to be putting on hold for cost reasons, and to put it bluntly, I missed the mark on how much these things are going to cost. Like, how is it just experience, like knowing that a full gut's going to be $500,000, $1 million, like, I mean, your market is way different than my market, first off, but like, how do you get there? I messed up.
It's a great question. And so, first of all, I would say everyone's always wrong, but architects are always wrong. I mean, we share one thing with the client, which is we always want way more than we can ever get for the budget, and we always want to design cool stuff. So I have stopped at my proposal stage before I'm signed on. I have stopped estimating just by myself. I have a contractor who is doing a project similar to that project, provide me with a rough budget just based on scope of work, and I put it in my proposal. It's got to be a contractor who is completing that type of project right now. I don't care what they did 6 months ago, and who cares about a year ago, because the costs are bananas. And it's life, and they are. And having them know before they even hire me is so important. That's one. Two, our office works a little differently, and I did not start this. My partner, Ben Bax did, but we do budget rounds after schematic design. We'll bring 4 contractors in at that point before they spend too much money with us. We have a scope of work. We probably have done like one of those super meetings I described, where at least I know what systems we're using, and then we ask 4 contractors to provide us with a rough budget. I'm actually doing that right now on another project. And what's nice about that is you get to choose kind of how you want to go from there. You know, did I go high? Did I go low? And what do I have to adjust? And then we like to select contractors at that point. You know, it's actually more risky for the contractor than it is the client, even if they were to charge us for the work that we do want them to do during the project, during the construction drawing phase. It's worth every penny.
and they could still potentially not get it. Something could still happen. So who wants to spend that kind of time? Time is money. So, but it's really helpful, and it's been one of the secret sauces for our projects and making sure that we're designing and detailing buildable projects. But the next piece of that is, how do I bring up passive house and the cost premium for it? And then what I usually do when I walk through, and I saw this come up as another question, so I'll do it quickly, but I have a pretty specific way I like to talk about passive house, especially in renovations, especially in New York. And it's just me walking through simply saying, if you want a house where I can remove most of your bugs and dust, we can seal it like a passive house. If you want to not hear that street noise outside, and you want really, really secure, safe windows, we can do a passive house. If once I do that, I've sealed your house so well, where I'll have to put a fresh air system. Did you know you can get fresh air 24/7? And here's the thing: nobody does. Nobody knew they can have a house without bugs and dust. Nobody knew that there was a filtered fresh air system 24/7. And those two items are the items that cost more and take more time. It takes about a month more to at least to seal a house, which we wouldn't have been doing before. But that is the thing that even our clients who say to me, I don't want to do a certified house. They want their house sealed. Once they know they can seal a house, like absolutely no one wants the unsealed house, like no one. And then so there is a cost premium. I mean, our clients are already spending a lot of money on these renovations. These are high-end renovations, and some people can judge them or not judge them just for that purpose. But they're doing them. They're doing them anyway. And so my other take on it is, anybody who's doing a high-end renovation who's not doing a passive house is just someone who didn't know it existed, because there's not a big cost premium. A couple of percent that 5% tops that you're going to get paid back for so quickly. It's really when you get into the more budget conscious projects, which we do as well, where you're looking at a 10% increase or more. But I can tell you, my budget conscious clients are much more interested in the cost savings that they're going to have with their heating and cooling. And so, maybe we're not able to go full boat on it, but we're able to do the windows. So we try to bring it all up in our first couple of meetings, and it works pretty well. But I start with the amenities before I start with money. You tell them what they're going to get out of it. You tell them how it's going to feel in there. You tell them how healthy the house is going to be, and then you get into money. Because once they realize those things, and not only that, but I sometimes I'm one of 5 architects walking through, and I'm bringing this stuff up, and nobody else did. I got that job. Period.
Yeah.
And when I mess up, which I do, and I get overexcited, and I tell everybody how we do this stuff, I lose that job every time. And I just get so annoyed. At myself. Some people want to know, but you got to wait till they ask. And then you gotta like keep it to like 5 sentences or 10 sentences. And if they want to know more, like let them ask. And we definitely have clients. I mean, John, who's on this call right now, knows this, right? Right now, I have 3 or 4 clients who are so much more technically proficient than I am. They want to know everything. That client's rare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned that, and that's the client that I have, but unfortunately, their pocketbook doesn't follow their
I think
vast breadth of knowledge.
I think what happens, a lot of people are looking at historical budgets, which don't matter anymore, no matter where you are. Everything just got expensive. Or a lot of people are actually hearing from their friends how much they spent on their renovation. And then, we've dove into those. I asked for a conference call with that friend. They bought half their stuff and they didn't add that in. Like, it's just stuff that happens in our world that nothing's really black and white. And so for me, getting that budget conversation out of the way early is really important.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure.
Such a great question, Brent. And yes, we have all messed up, and we have all put sometimes the wrong thing forward, and meeting your clients where they are is always the key, no matter what you're building for them. And if it's cost neutral, most of us are putting this in without even talking about it, because they're trusting us as professionals for that health, safety, and welfare. Health first, right? And safety first. But like Michael said, a lot of clients, it's about choices for them. Do you want a $5,000 countertop or a $5,000 ERV? Where are your priorities? And then meet them there. So great advice, Michael. Really love the answer you gave. And Great question, Brent. The next question I started, but then it was seconded by some other folks. Michael, how do you deal with fireplaces? What does New York like to see? What do your clients like to see? And what do you advise when you're putting a fireplace back into a passive house or just using it as a beautiful feature that is maybe not active?
Like I'm being judged by General Mitchell, who's on me right now as I speak. So first of all, we do fireplaces begrudgingly. If you're in a passive house, honestly, if you're in a spray foamed house with okay windows installed right, and you have a fireplace, your house is overheating. I mean, forget about passive house. All the houses are all tighter now than they used to be. But a passive house is really tight. So we do ethanol fireplaces wherever we can when they want them. I mean, we're in New York. I mean, people want a fireplace, and it's hard to tell them they can't have things. One, two. You can judge me for this. I never tell people what they can have. Period. Never. Not once. It's not my place to tell people what they can and can't have in their house or judge them for it. It's my job to do the best house I can. And sometimes it means I can't certify that house. It's not my world, it's their world. So we do gas fireplaces, easier to deal with. And we do wood burning fireplaces, really, really difficult to deal with. And then do not forget about the fireplaces you're not dealing with, because we have had some issues there where you got to make sure you're sealing them at the bottom and sealing them at the top. They are chimneys, for real. Anyway, and honestly, they're not even good chimneys because they've got holes in them from everything that's going on. So we try to seal it. Is the best way to put it. We just did a project where we actually bought a off the shelf from Australia. Our client found it, wood burning fireplace with and we were able to put the fresh air intake into the firebox. That's another thing. I mean, I do a lot of fireplaces in non-passive houses in New York City. None of them have the fresh air for that, or the makeup air for that fireplace in the firebox. They're stealing it from the room. So in the passive houses, at least we're putting it in the firebox. We're doing a sealed door, and some of the clients who have had it, we have one client who uses his wood burning fireplace in his passive house all the time. He opens his front windows in the middle of the winter, and he's super happy. And then he closes the windows and he turns it off because it's going to overheat in seconds. Gas a little bit less, but fireplaces they're tricky, and that is definitely where your passive house consultant comes in. I mean, I don't think I could do it without some of the help we've gotten from Building Type, and honestly, on one of my projects from PHI. We were just having some issues. Certified, not certified, it's got to be a safe project. But having people who can help you do these right, super important.
Just to be super clear, though, we would never recommend that you have a fireplace in your passive house, Michael, right?
Never. Thank you, John. That was probably the nicest way you were going to put that. Thank you so much.
Well, it's your fifth anniversary. I'm going to go live. Go easy on you. Just to say a couple more things to that, if I could. Having wood burning appliances or any sort of combustion appliances in our passive house buildings just puts a tremendous amount of stress on our mechanical system design and maintenance. So if you have a combustion appliance in your house and you're super tight building, or even just a code level air tightness building, the mechanical systems in your building have to function perfectly every time so that combustion appliance isn't a danger to you and your family. A 5 pascals difference in your building envelope could bring combustion byproducts into your house. And if you have a range hood that runs at 4 or 6 or 800 CFM, or if you have some other exhaust appliance that is, depressurizing the building, you definitely have risks of those pollutants and contaminants coming into the building. And so the systems that we put in place to counteract those pressure imbalances have to work perfectly, and they have to be maintained very well over time. So yes, it's possible. It's not a good idea. Something we have to be really careful about.
Yeah, and I would say the vast majority of our clients do choose to go all electric. We're having more and more people come to us that way, but we have this conversation with them, and a lot of people don't even fully understand the fact that I'm standing in front of my gas range with my exhaust fan on, and I am voluntarily having a carcinogen pass my nose as it gets to my exhaust fan. It just, nobody had that conversation with them, so they didn't know how to think about it. And some of them like, listen, I get it, but I still want it. And then we've got to do somersaults. But same thing with the fireplaces.
Great. I could go on and on with the fireplaces. We've done 3 now, almost 4 in the passive houses, but they're always airtight. They always have a direct air intake. And John, I hear you loud and clear. So I think we have time for one more question before we do an event break. And our next question up is from J.D. Johannes. Jay, are you able to unmute and ask your question, or would you like me to ask them for you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. My question's about tracking material source. So life cycle viewpoint here, it's the same sort of argument where, hey, I've got an electric vehicle, that's better. And someone says, oh, I don't know about that, because let's look at the whole, upstream and downstream, and there's so much carbon embodied in transportation or processing of the battery components, et cetera. So, when you have a great, building outcome, especially retrofitting, because keeping what's there, I really appreciated that in the presentation earlier. Part of that comes down, there's some great materials, as far as, means to an end, but what about those materials themselves? So I'm just wondering if there's like a sort of, separate, almost like energy modeling, where you have like a carbon tracking, like a material, database, where you're tracking that and using it as like sort of a decision, like who are you going to, what vendors are emerging, and that you're looking at innovation that they're doing for you. And that's the nature of the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, I mean, I think there are probably others on this who are going to be able to answer it more succinctly than I can. But I will say, one of the things that I love about where we are in this universe is we are in a place where we've already learned how to do a passive house. There's nothing I just described that should be so earth-shattering. And now we are also able to start to look at low embodied carbon material, carbon tracking for these materials. Used to be like I can get like one vendor to do some of this liquid applied air sealing. Now it's like 7. Okay, sounds good. How do you make your material? What's the off-gas? What's the VOCs? Now we get to do lots of other things. And I think that this industry is on a very fast train to get there. I think everyone's wanting to do it. Everyone needs to do it, and then we have enough competition out there amongst all these different companies where we can now get them to do it. So I think we're in a super exciting place where we can do it, and I want to do it more. And then the other point I'd make, I didn't show the projects that our office does that aren't full guts, but I would say 50% of our projects aren't full guts, and shouldn't be, and they won't be certified. But the first thing we try to do is figure out what I have to do to get the heat out of the house. I don't believe in an all electric house that you haven't fixed the envelope with, because like all of a sudden I'm spending too much money. But if I can fix the envelope enough to get the gas boiler out, well then, let's go. And so very often we're peeling back just enough where we can keep some of our existing material. But coming back to your question, if anybody wants to jump in more than I can, how far along are we with tracking some of the materials on some of these elements?
The next question, I know they asked me to ask for them, and it's what type of mortar was used to parge the walls in the first project?
Good question. Yeah. So and John, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but these are lime-based mortar walls. So it's important that you're using similar mortar, and it's lime-based mortar mix. For us, it's not really a big deal and a big problem. All of our masons who are attached to these projects, almost no matter what team they're on, it's what they use. We do so much Landmark and Townhouse work that they're very often taking a look at the mortar that's in the brick. And it really does depend sometimes on the year of the building, but this is for the most part lime-based mortar.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
by the way, and it's a slurry mix. It goes on pretty wet. And then, sorry, I have to mention Owen Colleen, who's not on here, who's another contractor we've done a lot of work with. Just drives this point home to us all the time. Fix the brick first. Period. You know, we've exposed all these bearing lines, bearing walls, and front and back walls. Sometimes the brick needs to be pointed. Like, forget about just doing a slurry. The slurry is not a structural fix. If you start to see some of the cracks or some of the other settling, point it, spot point it. You don't have to point the whole wall. But we're going to be covering up stuff that probably will last 100 years or more and won't be seen again. So, because a lot of the products we're putting on actually are quite elastic.
That's a great point. And anyone who thinks bulk water first and thinks about historic structures, look at all the building science about what kind of mortar and what kind of brick you're putting together. It has a huge impact on that moisture. So our next questions, I think you had two. Rachel, Rod, would you like to unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sounds great.
Yes. Okay, perfect. I think my first question was about venting the air cavity behind that brick wall. Well, I had two. So one was do you vent that space behind the brick wall when you're putting in a new backup wall? I think someone answered it and they said no, because you apply a liquid vapor open vapor barrier behind it. So I guess there's no need for additional venting.
The walls that are in the buildings that we're working on are a cavity wall. These are 3 wide brick walls that are brick to brick. So exterior walls or the party walls. I mean, a new wall that we will work on when we have the space, which we sometimes don't, would be a cavity wall. And then obviously you definitely want to vent that the right way. It'd be nice to have that space. But a lot of the stuff you're seeing here is brick to brick to brick. And so you are, and there's a few ways of testing this as well, but for better or worse, we know how porous our brick walls are, and they're porous is the answer. So you just got to assume that water is going to be coming out and drying in. It's just the walls are going to get wet, and they've been getting wet forever. So that's at least I think a piece of the answer. You said you had 2 questions.
Yeah, the second was in these retrofits, do you ever have clients who want to leave that interior brick exposed? And I'm assuming that in a passive house, that's unachievable, or?
I'm going to say it is achievable, and Jenna will fix it. So if I have a party wall and I'm far enough in from my exterior walls, and I know that I have a building next door and I know it's heated, I will then ask my passive house consultant as nicely as I can I treat the product I just put on the wall with paint? And so we've done it with a liquid applied product in one location in one spot, and I think it's held up pretty well. But John, you can answer that question differently if you feel like I don't want to oversell that as a notion.
No, I'd say that's exactly right. I think the fluid applied membranes that we use on the interior are often paintable. So you can do the same air tightness membrane on that brick and then choose your paint color to go over that with, and that works just fine. It's a little harder if you want like a clear, if you want to see the brick itself, if you want to see the brick and the mortar, then you'd have to go to some, like a clear acrylic type coating, which would probably not be as effective. But the way passive house works is if you're not so great in one spot, you just have to make it up somewhere else. So if we have an area of the building where it's a little bit more leaky than others, then we'd have to be better someplace else.
Yeah, I think there's a few products, by the way, that do this, but in my cellar, which is outside of my envelope because I use it as a painting studio, I have a Pro Soco product, which is a brick sealer. I did want to see the brick exposed in my cellar, and it's outside of my envelope, and we did test it, and it still tested well. I think there's some theory on how long that lasts, how it performs, but there are ways of doing it. But I think I'd be hard pressed to recommend to anybody how you'd ever really be able to do that in a certified space.
Yeah, and then I guess if it's part of your exterior envelope, especially your passive house envelope, there's no option to leave that interior brick as is, because you're going to have an additional insulation as backup, or have you kept the exterior wall itself as like the math wall?
No, I mean the exterior walls. First of all, you're going to get some moisture through there. So I think treating those walls carefully and really making sure that it's going to perform the way you want is important. But we have not left those exposed for a while, even in non-passive houses. It just has too many other moisture related and other related issues.
Okay.
And by the way, I think I saw another question come up regarding the glazing of the windows, and I forgot to mention one really important thing. And I saw Ellen Gottlieb, who's the realtor for 409 Sackett Street, which is the last house, which is on the market right now. It's a developer who chose to do passive, and because other developers in Brooklyn have sold passive townhouses for record numbers because they were passive. One of them sold that's for record number. The client who lost out on that bidding war hired us to do another house for them. So there are definitely developers in Brooklyn, at least, who are choosing to do it as an amenity that they can also sell, which is nice. But the last house that we were in, and I think was that John or Kevin can correct me, but I think it was 0.23. It was its final blower door number. And this is a retrofit. It was a somewhat complicated building. It had a stoop that kind of where the brownstone kind of came in, very similar to the first one. It's one where the cellar is part of the interior of the space. So that house tested really well, and that house had its glazing for the rear windows delivered separately, so they can install the rear sliding door. We're also lucky in this particular case; those were the 3 window types that you've seen in the products we just toured: Zola, Oiso, and Icon. And all 3 of those companies have been super helpful whenever we've needed to do things like have our glass delivered separately. I'm sure other window companies are too. Those are just the 3 window companies you just saw.
Fantastic. Rachel, great questions. Michael, love the answers. While you were chatting, I threw a link in the chat to a project we had on the accelerator where they did paint the party walls after putting on a vapor open air and vapor barrier retarder liquid product on their brick. They also insulated from those exterior party walls, probably 4 feet in or something like that, but watch the video, check it out. It's a great example. And if you private message Gary, who's in the chat, he was the architect, I believe, on that project. And that's a great project. I love that video. It's an early one with Gary and Norm Horn that's certified. And you can see Gary even told you what the air tightness was that they hit in the chat. So thanks for hanging out on this final 15. It looks like Sean St. Moore is back in the room. Welcome back, Sean. And yes. Do you want to call out our next question up or give some more insight?
No, I'm going to let you carry on. You, again, this whole question concierge, you've done a great job taking over. I'm still just feeling mystified of just, again, we're at 5 years. I just can't believe that here we are. And I'm so grateful for everyone showing up. Again, another great attendance today. And again, 5 years running, and people are still intrigued and interested. And I just love everything about it. So just glad everyone's here and catching the last few minutes of our episode today. So hope everyone's enjoying it.
I don't want to end the party. This is a great 5-year anniversary party. I'm thrilled so many people can hang out for the final 15 with the PHPH. Our next question up is from Anthony, but he asked me to ask it. And it's at the beginning of these projects, how do you sell clients on the additional price time? I think you covered that one, Michael.
Yep.
Are your clients ever on board when they approach you?
Are they ever, I'm sorry?
Are your clients ever already on board with Passive House when they approach you? He actually had a follow-up to that.
Yes.
He said something that's never been quite clear to him is the ERV location and whether or not you can deliver fresh air to the entire house. And he was asking, I believe, on project 2 or 3, does this project have a system of ERV ductwork throughout, as well as a secondary system of ducts for heating and cooling?
Got it. So I'll answer both questions there. So by the way, the first question, the reason I asked you to repeat it, I thought you asked if our clients are ever bored when I'm speaking to them, and I'm like, probably. If I had to guess, yeah, I try to keep it short, but sometimes I can't do it. So anyway, so I was like, should I really answer that? All right. So I would say more and more people are coming to us wanting a passive house. All they got to do is visit one, and you don't have to know whether it's a passive house or not. You close the front door and it's super quiet. And they're like, how do you do this? So I think more and more people are coming to us wanting it. We definitely have over the last year or two gotten a bunch of projects because we do passive house, and some of them have been really great projects. So it's happening more and more. I would say even those clients don't necessarily fully understand what they mean sometimes, and it's nice to go through the amenities again with them, just quickly, just to make sure they've got it. And then the ERV, which John, I'll describe quickly, and then you'll fix. But the ERVs and a lot of our houses are sometimes too tall to do one ERV, so we're doing one low, one high. For the single families, the projects you've just gone into, there are either Mitsubishi or LG heat pump systems inside doing the heating and air conditioning. It's funny, I didn't mention it in that video, but I almost always mention this too. Our houses just don't need that much heat. It just doesn't matter. I live in a passive house. I mean, this winter was super cold. I hate the winter. And I don't like being cold, and we barely used our heat. And I didn't realize that my top floor Mitsubishi's breaker was off the entire winter until, it's top floor, heat rises. Nobody cared, nobody complained. And so that's what we're dealing with here. The houses hold the heat in enough. It's really getting the cooling and dehumidification right, making sure that your exterior shading doesn't let the sun in to begin with, making sure they don't overheat. I think that's the key. And I don't know, John, if you want to answer that in a more explicit way.
No, I think that was awesome. Yes, we do keep the ventilation and the conditioning separate. They have really different uses. They have really different schedules. They have different demands on the systems. So the heating and cooling systems typically have very short duct work. Like Michael was showing, there's, maybe there's a closet, and then there's like a duct out either side and a return, not very much duct work. And then, that ERV ducting we tend to use like small diameter home run ducting throughout the house. And sometimes we can do it with one, sometimes we have to use two. It depends on how big, how much room we have for all those little ducts. But yeah, serving the whole house with ERV.
Great answer. I really love that. It's one of those things that once you do it a few times, you really get used to it. And you can really intuit the layout before you bring in all of your consultants and say, what do you think? Did I do a good job taking a first swing at it?
Well, I see that Voya wants to jump in and add something to the ERV.
Oh, sweet. Hi,
Yeah.
Voya.
And project 3, by the way, is LG. So
Hey, yay. No, thank you guys for giving me a quick second here on the ERV thing, because it is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart. Something that I struggle with from a building science perspective and a comfort perspective, especially in well-built, well-designed, tight homes that are extremely low load, such as passive, obviously. And something that Gord Cook's not on this call, is he? He might get mad at me again if we have to have this argument in front of a bunch of people.
He's not, Voya, unless he's in under another name. I just searched it.
Good. He usually doesn't like to hide.
I'm totally cool with the argument online. Let's go.
So the question was about getting ERV and getting fresh air to the entire house. I am still a firm believer, and I think this is something that we as an industry really do need to fight out with not just codes, but also the passive, the FIAS folks in writing the rules. The fresh air to the bedrooms is an amazing idea where you guys live. In a passive house in my climate, for example, it is a horrible, horrible idea. This should never be done. Unfortunately, we are forced to do it, whether we like it or not. But especially in a space where, dumping fresh air into a bedroom during conditions where I have no sensible load and the humidity is 86% or higher, the absolute last place I want to dump fresh air into is a bedroom where I have no way to sense it and no way to actually do anything about it until I'm already way, way past uncomfortable. So I do love the idea of getting fresh air into the entire space, especially in a passive house where most of my control for my comfort and conditioning system is located outside the bedrooms, right? Typically, my sensors are going to be in a hallway or somewhere close to a return, close to a central return. So even for spaces and bedrooms, which I always advocate, every single bedroom, every single room other than kitchen or closet or utility should have a return. Typically, I would love to sense that fresh air, the humidity, the temperature close to where my system is so I can actually activate my HVAC system and help dehumidify, or activate my dehumidifier and help dehumidify. Because let's face it, I mean, a lot of the areas, even up north in Ohio River Valley, they're very temperate climate for most of the year for the shoulder seasons. But it is extremely humid, especially at night when my sensible load is extremely low. So just one of those thoughts that we as the passive house building industry really do need to think about: where are we dumping air depending on the climate? And is that the air that we really want to dump somewhere we're not sensing, yet we need the most comfort during those times?
Okay, I vote for a future construction tech ERV specific session where we dive into these things, because it's these little conversations. This is like at the end, which I love. I love the question. Whether you're right or wrong, I also like that argument. But I think that this is going to be a next session. Let's do it. Let's bring on the people who know. Let's have them all talk it out. Let's talk about the different climate zones and what we're going to do, humid or not. And that's what these are for. Let's go. This is fun. And then, by the way, I see we're almost at the end. I'm also going to be available on the Reimagine Buildings Collective for those of you who are not on it. Try to join for a little while. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. I'll give you a great example. I was looking for a fire-rated passive house door, and I found it through that, as well as a few other people. It's not just for newbies; it's for everybody. But I'll be available on that as well to kind of continue this conversation. It's one of the things that I like most about it. The way I use it, which is maybe not the way everybody uses it, I like to use it like it's those conversations you have in the conferences that are after the conference session, where you just keep talking, and some of the best conversations are from there. So I'm even cool continuing this ERP conversation on there, but this should totally be a future construction tech session.
100%, Michael. This is how nerdy it gets, and we love it. There's no question too simple or too complicated, and we don't have to agree, especially if we're in different climates. We shouldn't agree. We should hold it down where we live. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Michael, Zach, Kim, Kara, everyone at the Accelerator. Thanks for keeping the fires burning for 5 years. We love you, and this was a great day. Thanks to everyone for coming. Yeah, big heart, Sean Sainamore. Thanks, Ilka and Kevin and Mark for co-hosting for 5 years. And we will see you next week. And we will see you on the Reimagine Buildings Collective.